The contractions hit her like crashing waves, sharp, sudden, unforgiving. Emily gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, her knuckles whitening as pain shot through her abdomen again. Her breath came in gasps, eyes flicking toward the clock on the wall. 6:47 a.m. The baby was coming, no doubt about it. And yet, she was alone. Again. She fumbled for her phone, her thumb trembling as she dialed the number she knew by heart. It rang once.
Twice.
Then his voice. "Hey, babe. Can I call you back in a sec? I'm in a meeting, big client."
Click.
The line went dead. Meeting.
Right.
Emily let out a bitter laugh, swallowing a sob. She wasn't stupid. She knew exactly where he was. With her. The woman he thought she didn't know about. The woman he had started lying for, dressing better for, disappearing more often for. Another contraction tore through her body, and this time, she fell to her knees on the cold tiled floor, a low cry escaping her lips. Her water broke. Panic rose in her throat like bile, but she forced herself up, grabbing her hospital bag that had been packed and ready for 2 weeks. No time to dwell. No time to wait for a man who had already chosen someone else. She dragged herself into the car, each movement a battle between pain and resolve. The hospital was 15 minutes away, but that drive might as well have been across the country. She made it only 2 blocks before the reality became undeniable. She wouldn't make it. Not like this. Not alone. And then it hit her. His office. It was 5 minutes away. Closer than the hospital. And if he was there, if he wasn't actually in a meeting, then by God, he was going to see what he had abandoned. With trembling hands and a fire growing inside her stronger than the contractions themselves, Emily turned the steering wheel sharply, tires squealing as she changed direction. Her breaths came fast now, panting, desperate, but beneath the pain was something sharper. Betrayal. 5 minutes later, she pulled up in front of the sleek glass building where Daniel worked as a high-powered marketing executive. She left the engine running, barely managing to shove open the door, and stumbled toward the lobby. Her appearance was enough to send the receptionist into instant panic. "Ma'am? Are you? Oh my God. Are you in labor?" "Daniel Porter," Emily said through clenched teeth. "Tell him his wife is having his baby in the lobby." The woman blinked, horrified, then fumbled for the phone. Meanwhile, Emily sank onto the velvet couch in the corner, legs trembling. The pain was constant now, waves on top of waves. A man in a suit rushed toward her, his expression pale. "Mrs. Porter, we've called an ambulance. Please, just hang on." No, her voice was iron. "Get Daniel.
Now."
From the elevator doors across the room, a familiar laugh echoed before the man himself emerged, shirt slightly wrinkled, jacket slung over one shoulder, and beside him, the mistress. Tall, blonde, and smiling, until she saw Emily. Daniel froze mid-step. His face drained of color. "Emily? What are you doing here?" Her eyes locked onto his. "Giving birth. Alone. Because you left me." Silence fell over the lobby like a dropped curtain. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "Is that his wife?" Emily doubled over with another contraction, a scream escaping her this time. She felt arms reach out. Someone tried to help her lie down, but she swatted them away. "He doesn't get to miss this," she said through gritted teeth. "Let him watch what he abandoned." Daniel stumbled toward her, still processing. "Emily, I didn't think. I was just in a meeting." "Save it," she shouted. "You said you'd be there. You promised me, Daniel. I'm giving birth in your office lobby because you thought your mistress mattered more?" The woman beside Daniel stepped back awkwardly, shrinking under the weight of Emily's fury. "I didn't know. Didn't know." Emily turned her eyes on her. "You're wearing the same perfume I found on my pillow. Don't pretend." The ambulance siren howled in the distance, but Emily barely heard it. Time blurred. The pain was too strong, too consuming. And yet, in the chaos, she felt something else. Power. The kind that comes when a woman, shattered and betrayed, stands up and decides no more. She gave birth right there in the middle of that pristine lobby floor, surrounded by strangers, bathed in fluorescent lights, and watched by the very man who had forsaken her. And as the baby's cry pierced the silence, echoing through the marble halls, Emily looked up at Daniel, sweat and tears mixing on her face. "It's a girl," the paramedic said gently, handing her the tiny, wailing bundle. Emily clutched her daughter to her chest, her heart breaking and swelling at once. "You missed it," she whispered to Daniel. "And you don't get another chance." Daniel took a step forward, tears in his eyes. "Emily, please." But she turned her face away. The sirens had gone quiet. The whispers in the lobby grew louder. But Emily only had ears for her daughter now, her small, perfect daughter, who had come into the world not in a hospital, not in safety, but in defiance, in strength. She left the building an hour later, her daughter in her arms, never once looking back. Emily Ross had always believed in building things that lasted: friendships, memories, homes, families. She wasn't a dreamer by nature, more of a planner. Someone who made to-do lists, color-coded calendars, and carefully structured budgets. Her love for Daniel had been no different, measured, thoughtful, nurtured over time like a garden she believed would bloom forever. They met when she was 26, freshly promoted at a publishing house, and he was 31, charismatic and endlessly ambitious. He was magnetic, the kind of man who lit up rooms without trying. Emily fell for him slowly, then all at once, drawn in not just by his charm, but the way he made her feel like she mattered in a world that so often made women feel small. They married 2 years later in a quiet ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family. Emily wore her mother's lace veil. Daniel cried when she walked down the aisle. At the time, everyone said they were perfect together, him with his confidence and drive, her with her warmth and grounding presence. They talked about children early on, how many they wanted, what kind of parents they'd be. Emily had always wanted to be a mother. Not just in the romanticized way, but in the real, messy, aching way. She wanted scraped knees, midnight fevers, lullabies, and bedtime stories. But after the honeymoon glow faded, something started to shift. Daniel's late nights at work became more frequent. At first, she didn't question them. He was chasing a promotion. "It's just a season," he'd say. "Once I close this client, we'll finally take that trip to Santorini." But the trip never happened. Instead, he started coming home smelling faintly of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. He became distant, not angry or cruel, just absent in a way that hurt more than shouting ever could. And Emily, ever the planner, tried to fix it. She made his favorite dinners, left sticky notes with love messages in his briefcase, suggested couples retreats. He'd smile, kiss her on the cheek, promise things would get better. They didn't. By the time she found out she was pregnant, their connection felt paper-thin. She had dreamed of that moment, telling him with a handmade card and a tiny pair of booties. But the night she sat across from him at the dinner table, heart pounding, he didn't even look up from his phone as she said, "I'm pregnant." "Really?" he said flatly, thumb scrolling. "That's wow. Great news." She went to bed early that night, turned to the wall, and cried silently. But still, she hoped. She hoped the baby would bring them closer. That when he saw their child, when he held them for the first time, the weight of family would pull him back to her. But now, 8.5 months later, she was sitting in a therapist's waiting room alone while Daniel claimed to be too swamped to make it. She was the one who painted the nursery. She was the one who read baby books. She was the one who went to every doctor's appointment alone.
And Daniel?
He had someone else now. Emily didn't need evidence to know it. She had sensed it the way you sense an incoming storm, before it breaks, before the lightning, just the quiet in the air. There were little things. New cologne, new shirts. And one evening, when his phone buzzed and she glanced down to see the message light up, "Last night was amazing. Same time tomorrow." She didn't confront him. Not then. She just walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and let the walls close in. Her baby kicked inside her, and she whispered, "I'm so sorry. You deserve more than this." Daniel, for his part, didn't see himself as the villain. That's the thing about betrayal. It rarely feels like betrayal to the one doing it. In his mind, he was just surviving. Work was stress. Marriage was routine. And Emily, well, she had changed. Always tired. Always emotional. He missed the days when she used to laugh more, when she wasn't constantly talking about prenatal vitamins and nursery colors. And then came her. Vanessa. Vanessa was everything Emily wasn't anymore.
Young.
Energetic. Spontaneous. She worked in the same building, an HR manager with a sharp wit and an even sharper wardrobe. Their friendship started innocently enough. Drinks after work. Late-night talks about stress. Then one night, after a long client pitch, things went too far, and neither of them stopped it. He told himself it was just an escape. He wasn't going to leave Emily. Not yet. Not until after the baby. Maybe not even then. But he couldn't deny that when he was with Vanessa, he felt wanted. Like a man again. Vanessa knew he was married. She wasn't stupid, but she convinced herself it was temporary. That he loved her more. That once the baby was born and things got too complicated, he'd finally make the choice they were both waiting for. She didn't expect Emily to show up bleeding in the middle of the office lobby, writhing in pain. She didn't expect Daniel to go pale like a ghost or mutter, "Oh God, what have I done?" She didn't expect the scene that unfolded. The crowd, the sirens, the screams. She especially didn't expect to feel shame. Back in that moment, watching Emily cradle the tiny baby girl, Vanessa saw something she hadn't expected. Power. Not weakness. Not fragility. But the raw, breathtaking strength of a woman who had been broken and still chose to stand tall. And in that lobby, something shifted. Emily wasn't just a scorned wife anymore. She was a mother. A warrior. And Daniel, he didn't look powerful. He looked small. The days that followed were a blur. News of the dramatic birth at the high-rise office spread like wildfire. Someone had recorded a video on their phone. It went viral within hours. Woman gives birth in lobby after husband allegedly cheated. Comments poured in.
Some mocked.
Some wept. But most cheered. Emily became an unintentional symbol of strength. But none of that mattered to her. What mattered was the soft breathing of her daughter at night. The warmth of tiny fingers curling around hers. The peace that came from finally choosing herself. Daniel tried to fix things, of course. He sent flowers. Left voicemails. Even came by the hospital once, trying to hold the baby, saying, "Let's work through this, Emily." But her eyes, calm, clear, told him it was too late. She had already started building something new. Something lasting. This time, not for them, but for her. For the little girl who deserved a life free of broken promises. And Daniel? He was left with everything he had thought he wanted, and none of what he truly needed. By the next morning, Emily's world had changed in ways she never anticipated. She sat on the stiff hospital bed, her newborn daughter sleeping soundly in the bassinet beside her, tiny hands curled into fists like she was ready to fight the world already. Emily stared at her in quiet awe, the weight of everything that had happened pressing against her chest like a stone, and yet, at the same time, something lighter was blooming beneath it. A strange peace. A knowing. But peace wouldn't last long. Her phone, lying face up on the side table, lit up every few seconds. Messages from numbers she didn't know. Calls from reporters. DMs piling up on her social media, which had exploded overnight. "Are you the woman who gave birth at her husband's office? You're trending everywhere. You're so strong. I'm crying just watching the video. Please let us interview you for a women's empowerment feature." Emily hadn't even known someone recorded it. She hadn't seen the footage yet, wasn't sure she wanted to, but apparently, the dramatic scene of her collapsing in the office lobby, shouting for Daniel, giving birth while strangers formed a panicked circle around her, had struck a collective nerve. In a society where women were often expected to endure quietly, to smile through betrayal, to raise children in the wreckage left behind by selfish men, Emily's act of defiance wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. It ignited something. Every major blog had picked it up. News stations were discussing the birth that shattered silence. Hashtags flooded Twitter. Hashtag born in betrayal. Hashtag office birth queen. Hashtag she did it alone. Strangers rallied behind her like an army. Women from around the world shared their own stories of abandonment and survival. He left me in labor too. I walked into the hospital alone. I raised 3 kids after he disappeared. Emily's inbox became a mosaic of grief, strength, and solidarity. And through it all, Daniel watched in horror. His phone buzzed too, but not with praise. Former colleagues distanced themselves. His boss, furious that the company's name was now tangled in the scandal, put him on leave until further notice. Online detectives found his profile in minutes. His LinkedIn was flooded with angry comments. Cheater. Coward. How do you sleep at night? Even Vanessa stopped returning his calls. He sat alone in his apartment that night. He hadn't gone home to the house he shared with Emily. He knew better. The nursery Emily had so carefully painted with clouds and stars probably felt like a tomb now. No, he stayed in a hotel, drinking scotch he didn't even like, scrolling through social media posts about him. He told himself it wasn't fair. That people didn't understand the full story. That he tried. That things weren't great before Vanessa. That Emily had changed. But every excuse echoed hollow in the sterile quiet. For the first time in months, Daniel truly saw himself, not through the lens of desire or ego, but in the raw, unfiltered reflection of consequence. He thought of the moment he saw Emily in the lobby, soaked, screaming in agony, eyes filled not with fear but fury. He'd never forget how she looked at him, not like a woman pleading with her husband, like a queen delivering a sentence. And worse than that, he knew she was right. Meanwhile, Emily stayed in the hospital a day longer than planned. She needed it, not medically, but emotionally. The nurses were kind. One of them, an older woman named Ruth, sat beside her and asked softly, "How are you really doing?" Emily hesitated. "Honestly, I feel like I should be falling apart. But I'm not. I think I did that already months ago. This is something else. Like I finally stopped bleeding where no one could see." Ruth squeezed her hand. Sometimes, the moment they break you is the one where you finally see who you are. The words stayed with her. Emily began to write again, something she hadn't done since college. She opened a blank note on her phone, meant to vent, but it poured out of her like confession. Lines about betrayal, about survival, about what it means to bring a life into the world as your own is falling apart. She didn't plan to share it. But that changed when she posted a small piece of it online, an open letter to her daughter. It went viral in hours. To my daughter, who came into this world wrapped in strength and noise, not silence. Your first breath was the loudest no more I've ever spoken. The comments were endless. Thank you for saying what so many of us couldn't. I'm printing this and putting it on my mirror. Your daughter is lucky to have you. Emily didn't feel like a hero. She still cried some nights. Still wondered if she'd ever trust again. But every message reminded her that she wasn't alone. That she hadn't just walked through fire, she'd walked through it carrying someone else, and they both survived. As for Daniel, his world was shrinking. He showed up at her door one afternoon, flowers in hand, suit wrinkled, eyes hollow. "Emily," he said softly.
Please.
"Let's talk." She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, baby asleep on her shoulder. "Talk about what?" "I know I screwed up. I wasn't there. I didn't know how bad it had gotten. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." She looked at him long and hard. "You didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. While I was creating life, you were chasing someone else's body. While I was scared and alone, you were lying. And now, you want forgiveness wrapped in convenience. I want a chance to make it right." She shook her head. "You don't get to make it right, Daniel. You just get to live with what you did. Same way I lived through it." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Finally, he turned and walked away. That night, Emily rocked her daughter gently to sleep, humming a song her own mother used to sing. She looked around the small nursery, her favorite blanket on the chair, tiny socks folded in drawers, and smiled softly. Not because everything was perfect, but because finally it was hers. Hers to rebuild. Hers to protect. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of one she would write on her own terms. Emily stood by the window of her small home office, cradling a warm cup of tea as the rain trickled gently against the glass. Outside, the world moved as usual. Cars rushed past, distant voices echoed, dogs barked in the street, but inside, her world was quiet. Not empty. Still. Peaceful in a way she hadn't known in years. It had been 2 weeks since the birth, since the chaos of that day had turned her life inside out, and the media whirlwind that followed still hadn't fully died down. Offers were still rolling in: interviews, podcasts, talk shows. Some wanted her story. Some wanted her anger. Others just wanted her pain. But Emily had paused it all. She needed clarity first. Not for the world. For herself. Motherhood had opened something in her, some ancient, primal force she hadn't realized lived within her bones. And as she rocked her newborn daughter, Ava, during the long nights, she realized something. She had spent years shrinking to make space for someone who never deserved the room. She had always believed strength looked like staying, enduring, working things out. But now she saw it clearly. Sometimes strength was in walking away, in saying, "This is not enough." And that clarity became her turning point. That morning, she opened her laptop with purpose. She hadn't felt purposeful in a long time. But now she had an idea. Not one born from revenge, but from rebirth. The letter she'd written to her daughter had already struck a chord. People weren't just sympathizing, they were connecting. Thousands of women had messaged her, sharing their stories, their heartbreaks, their survival. She saw herself in each of them, and she began to wonder, what if this pain could build something? She began drafting a plan, a storytelling platform for women like her. A digital space where mothers, wives, partners, survivors could share their stories anonymously or proudly. A place not just for catharsis, but for visibility, advocacy,
change.
She decided to call it The First Cry, a name symbolizing the beginning of both life and truth. As the days passed, she poured her energy into it. Late-night feeds and early morning emails. She hired a freelance web designer using her savings. Wrote blog entries during Ava's naps. Reached out to support networks for partnerships. She wasn't just surviving now, she was building. Every decision was deliberate. Every move was fueled by the woman she had become, no longer quiet, no longer waiting. Emily was not just writing a new chapter. She was publishing it for the world. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel sat in silence, scrolling through one of the early posts on The First Cry. The words stung, not just because they were Emily's, but because they were honest in a way he hadn't been with himself. He recognized the cracks she wrote about, the slow unraveling, the moments he could have turned back, but chose not to. For the first time, he saw them from her eyes. He felt ashamed. Daniel had been spiraling since the office incident. HR had suspended him indefinitely under the weight of bad press. Clients had pulled out. Vanessa had cut ties completely, texting him once, *, "We're not good people, Daniel. I can't be part of this anymore." *, he didn't argue. He couldn't. He missed Emily in waves. Not the Emily he took for granted, the one making dinner while he scrolled through emails. But the Emily he first fell in love with. The one who laughed too loud at old movies. The one who left affirmations on mirrors. The one who believed in him. He now understood what he'd destroyed. And worse, what he'd lost. He tried calling again. Once.
Twice.
Then gave up. She deserved her silence. So instead he began writing a letter. Not to win her back. Not to plead. But to say what he should have said months ago. *, I see it now. I failed you and I failed our daughter. Not with a single mistake, but with the way I slowly chose myself over us, again and again. *, he didn't send it, but he wrote it. That, for now, was a beginning. Back at home, Emily's project was gaining traction fast. She featured real voices, unedited, raw. Stories of women left in delivery rooms, of quiet divorces, of rebuilding after emotional abuse. She featured professionals too, therapists, midwives, advocates. The response was overwhelming. The first cry was becoming a movement, but it wasn't without challenges. One evening, as Ava cried harder than usual and Emily stood swaying with exhaustion, she felt the weight again, that creeping fear that she was doing it all wrong, that she wasn't enough, that maybe she should have forgiven Daniel for the sake of her child. But as if sensing her mother's storm, Ava's cries suddenly softened. Her small eyes locked onto Emily's, and her tiny hand reached upward, brushing against her chest. That touch grounded her more than anything else could. Emily whispered, "I promise, I won't let you grow up thinking love means pain." The next day, she scheduled a meeting with a local women's shelter. She wanted to start workshops, writing therapy for mothers, digital storytelling programs for survivors. She didn't just want to tell stories anymore. She wanted to help rewrite lives. That afternoon, as she presented her proposal, nervous and unsure, she ended her pitch with a line that silenced the room. No woman should have to give birth in the shadow of abandonment. But if she does, she should know she's not alone. They approved the collaboration on the spot. It was a victory. A small one, but a seed planted. As the platform grew, media attention returned, but this time, not in scandal, but admiration. Interviews shifted from the woman who gave birth in a lobby to the founder of a movement inspiring thousands. The story had changed. She had changed. Daniel watched it all from afar. He didn't interfere. He didn't try to reclaim anything. He respected the space Emily carved out for herself, for their daughter. But he quietly started attending therapy. Not to win Emily back, but to understand why he had become the man who could hurt her like that. Sometimes he drove by their old house at night, lights glowing from the nursery window, and just sat there, hoping Ava would grow up never having to see him as the man he had been. A month later, on a crisp spring morning, Emily hosted her first live event for the first cry. Dozens of women gathered in a community center filled with candles and soft music. There was laughter, there were tears. Women stood at a microphone and told truths that had been buried for years. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she walked to the front, holding Ava in her arms. The room quieted. "My name is Emily Ross," she began, voice steady. "And I gave birth in a place no woman should ever have to. Not because I was brave, but because I had no choice. And now, I've decided to give voice to every woman who's ever felt that same silence." The applause that followed wasn't thunderous. It was tender, respectful. It was real. That night, as she lay beside her daughter, who now slept more than cried, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not grief, not anger, not even strength. Hope. The kind that doesn't demand fireworks or headlines. The kind that lingers like light through a window. She had survived the storm. And now, she was planting gardens in its aftermath. The auditorium was packed, standing room only. The final night of the First Cry's national storytelling tour had brought hundreds of women, families, and allies to the heart of Chicago. The lights were low, casting a golden glow across the crowd, and on stage, Emily stood backstage in a soft blue dress, heart pounding in her chest as the final speaker finished her story. A woman had just shared how she fled a violent marriage with her infant tucked into a diaper bag, walking 10 miles to safety. The room stood and applauded for her, not just because of her survival, but because of what she became afterward. A shelter volunteer, a mother, a voice for others. Emily took a deep breath. This was it, the final night, the final words. And she had saved her own story for last. Backstage, Ava, now 6 months old, sat giggling in her grandmother's lap. Her soft brown curls and ocean blue eyes seemed to follow Emily every time she stepped out of sight. As Emily adjusted the small microphone on her collar, she glanced at her daughter and smiled. "You are the reason I kept going," she thought. "You are the reason I found my voice." The MC introduced her with warmth and admiration. "Please welcome the founder of the First Cry, a woman whose story sparked a movement that has changed lives across the country, Emily Ross." The applause was thunderous, but it was the kind of applause that came from love, from solidarity, from people who knew. Emily walked out slowly, the light warm on her face, and for a brief moment, she paused, taking it all in. She began softly. 6 months ago, I gave birth in the lobby of a corporate office building alone. Not because I wanted to, but because the man I had built a life with, the man who promised to be there, chose not to show up. Silence swept the room, heavy but attentive. A few people nodded, eyes already glassy. I was humiliated, in pain, heartbroken. But something happened that day, something I didn't understand until much later. I stopped waiting. For love. For apologies. For someone to rescue me. And instead, I began writing the life my daughter deserved. She walked slowly across the stage. I named this platform the first cry because that moment, when a baby takes their first breath, isn't just about life entering the world. It's about truth.
Strength.
A declaration. That first cry is a scream into the universe that says, I am here, and I will not be ignored. The room erupted in applause, but Emily raised a hand gently. I want to share something personal with you tonight. Something that hasn't been part of any interview or headline. She looked down for a moment, then back up, her voice steady but soft. Daniel, the father of my child, is here tonight. Gasps rippled through the room. A few heads turned, whispers fluttered. But Emily didn't flinch. I invited him. And in the second row, Daniel sat, still, eyes fixed on her. His face was aged from guilt, thinner, humbler. He wore no suit, just a plain shirt, no tie. And tears shimmered openly in his eyes. He and we've been on a long, painful road, one I wouldn't wish on anyone. But something changed when I saw him try to become someone better. Not for me, but for her. She glanced toward the side stage, where Ava's tiny head peeked out from her grandmother's shoulder. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. And healing doesn't always mean we go back. But sometimes, healing means letting go of hate, so we can make room for something else, something more important. Emily stepped forward, hands folded in front of her. Tonight, I want to say something publicly that I've only said privately. Daniel, thank you for finally choosing to be a father. Daniel stood slowly, hands shaking. A few people clapped softly, some uncertain, others moved by the vulnerability of it all. Emily didn't look away from him. We are not a couple. We never will be again. But we are parents. And Ava will grow up knowing that both her mother and her father chose her, together, even if not side by side. A hush fell again. And then, suddenly, the applause came, not just for Emily, not just for Daniel, but for what they had chosen. Growth over bitterness, peace over punishment, a future over a past. Afterward, as people crowded to speak with her, to hug her, to share their own stories, Emily slipped away briefly to the side stage. Ava reached for her instantly. There's my girl, she whispered, pulling her close. You did great. As they cuddled quietly, Daniel approached slowly, uncertain. She's beautiful, he said. She is. I never deserved either of you, he added. No, you didn't. But life isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we do next. He looked down at Ava and smiled softly. I'd like to try. Emily nodded. One step at a time. As her father. Nothing more. Daniel blinked fast, nodding in return. Thank you. They didn't hug. They didn't linger. He stepped back, giving her space, understanding now what boundaries looked like. That night, after Ava was tucked into her crib and the hotel room was quiet, Emily stood on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer like stars made of glass. A warm breeze passed through her hair, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel broken. She felt reborn. This was her new life. A life she had built not from the pieces of a failed marriage, but from the roots of her own strength. From the first cries and the first laughs. From late nights and early mornings. From fear, from hope, from everything in between. She had turned betrayal into bravery, pain into purpose, silence into story. And now she knew, no matter what came next, she and Ava would always have this. A story that began in heartbreak, but ended in power.